Yes.
wasn't making up their mind for them. He wasn't telling them the answers to the questions. But it did take his apostles aside, and they asked him, they said, what did this parable mean? They didn't fully understand it, so they asked him. He told them what it was. So that tells me that he was eager for them to ask and to reason why.
And we do that on a regular basis when we're talking to somebody. When we're talking to our children, we'll ask them questions. Now, what do you think about that? What do you think that means? And what's 2 plus 2? You want them to think. You give them a question. How many New Testaments did the people have to reference as Jesus was teaching them the parables? Well, obviously nobody had a New Testament. It wouldn't be written for decades. And so as he taught, he was giving them parables, and those parables were stories that they could hold on to. If you hear a story, you can remember a story. And that's one of the benefits of teaching in parables. All right, let's go right to this worksheet. And we are looking in Matthew 13 primarily. We didn't start on this last week, did we? Okay, did we read the worksheet? Did we read Matthew 13? Okay. All right. I should have taken note as to what we did. I couldn't remember exactly what we did. And I looked at this and I thought, man, that looks familiar. I think we did that. And I said, no, we didn't do that either. So, number 1, the parable of the sower recorded in Matthew 13, 3 through 8 is the first parable to be specifically blanked as a parable in the Gospels. What do you think might go in that blank? And this is it's the first parable to be named or identified as a parable. When you look at the text, it says in verse 3, Matthew 13, 3, he spoke many things to them in parables, saying, sower went out to sow. This parable also comes with an blank of its meaning given by Jesus. Explanation. Not all parables came with an explanation, but this one did. This parable also comes with an explanation of its meaning given by Jesus. Notice the things Jesus identifies or explains for us in 13, 18 to 23. The seed is intimated. You know what I mean when I say intimated? In other words, he doesn't come right out and say it, but when you read through the parable and the explanation of the parable, the only conclusion you can come to is that the seed is something, and the seed is intimated to be the word of the, anybody get this? Kingdom. The word of the kingdom. What kingdom? Kingdom of Rome? Kingdom of the Lord. Kingdom of heaven. Kingdom of God. That kingdom. The birds represent the blank blank. And you can be browsing down through verses 18 to 23. Verse 19, when anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, who comes? The evil one. The evil one. So the birds represent the evil one. Who is? The devil. Ha-Satan, the enemy, the accuser, the great dragon, serpent. The ground by the road is said to be people who do not blank. And this isn't a race. It's also in verse 19, by the way. The ground by the road represents people who do not understand. In other words, the word of the kingdom is being put out there, but people don't understand it. Anybody else listen to the radio when you drive in your car? I listen to the radio. The only thing I really want to hear from the radio is music. And so when the commercials are playing, unless it's some really entertaining commercial, I generally tune it out. I don't care what they're saying. I don't want commercials. I want music. And the last thing I want to hear is a commercial telling me how few commercials the radio station has. We play fewer commercials. Well, shut up, play some music then. I'm sorry, I didn't really say that, but that's what I'm thinking. So I'm all about the bass. Unless it's vibrating my car. If it's my bass, it's okay. Well, whoever would have thought. But the wayside soil, the ground by the road, represents people who don't understand, don't care. Those who give up the word because of blank or blank are the rocky soil. What would go in those two blanks?
Trouble or persecution.
Affliction or persecution. They give it up because of affliction or persecution. So you got two soils. One's wayside, the roadside soil, and the seed hits it and it's hard, so the birds come and eat that soil. It's gone. Rocky soil accepts the seed. Something gets started, but affliction comes, persecution comes, and it's all over. The thorny soil represents those who fail to produce anything based on the word because of the blank of the world. Worry or anxiety of the world, and the blank of wealth. Deceitfulness of wealth. How is wealth deceitful?
You don't need God if you're wealthy.
That's right. You don't need God. You don't need anybody else. I got my money. I got my security. Everything is taken care of because I've got money. What do we call this thing the government has that's set up to provide for us when we're old? Social security. Which, here we're back to that idea of intimating. It intimates that in order to be socially secure, we have to have money. And I know the way the world works in its economy, the money's involved, but, well, I know what you mean. But this idea of security and wealth goes hand in hand in this world, but not in the kingdom. Those who understand the word and bear fruit because of it are identified as the blank blank.
Good soil.
Good soil. The good soil takes in the seed, plant grows up, it grows to maturity, it produces fruit. And this is one of those places where you could draw out the meaning of the parable. You don't bear fruit necessarily overnight. It takes time. Somehow the ground is prepared, and the seed falls on that ground, and it takes time to germinate. Naturally speaking, there's sunshine, there's water, and the seed grows. When any of you were kids, did you do the science project where you take a bean and put it in some cotton and put the water on there and wait till the bean starts to sprout? It takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. But when you're 8 years old, you come back to the cup. It's not a bean yet. Where's my bean? It takes time. Bud?
You know, one time we were given that project too. What amazed me was we put the bean in there and it poked a little hole in the box on the top of the lid so that sunlight could get through.
Right?
You know, not a big hole, but we planted it upside down. And the teacher wanted us to see that it would actually turn towards the light and come out that little hole. You know, even though it wasn't planted under the hole.
Right.
But that's where the sunlight come, and it would come right over there to it.
Pretty neat, huh?
And start out of that little hole. He said, how did it know where that hole was, you know?
I got one of those vines in my office. I don't know what it's called. You see them all over the place, and I'll take the whole pot into the bathroom and set it in the sink and run it and just soak that thing with water, because it's got a little hole in the bottom where the water will run out and it won't get molded or anything like that. But then when I take it and put it back in the place in my office, all the leaves are kind of twisted and turned. But in a couple of days, what happens? Nothing's upside down anymore. All of those leaves have moved and have turned towards the light. And I'm not trying to make more out of this parable than is here, but we see that in Christians. Christians are always turning towards the light, moving towards the light. They're seeking out the light, which is very relatable to this particular parable. The plants grow up, and they grow up, they take the sun. The sun is what the plants use to do the photosynthesis, to make food from the rays of the sun, and they bear fruit. All right, number 2. Any questions, by the way, about the parable of the sower or the soils? Okay. The tares among the wheat, 13:24 through 30.
Marty,
Yes.
I want to ask just a general question about
All right.
parables. Now, most of these parables were about things that his listeners would be very familiar with, farmers and
Yes.
that sort of thing. Now, occasionally, now I don't know whether the Good Samaritan would fall into the category of a parable or not.
Okay.
Does it?
I think it does. I don't know that it might be something that actually happened, because he doesn't say it's a parable.
That's the question I have there, because had he told that story about a Samaritan who did a good act to a Jewish man, you would expect someone in the crowd would say, "Oh, that never happened. That wouldn't happen."
Right.
That sort of thing.
Well,
It sounded like it came out of the front page of the Jerusalem Post or something.
let's take a look at it and just notice some things about that. It's Luke 16. That's where we find that. Oh, no, that's the rich man and Lazarus. You're asking about the Good Samaritan. Is that chapter 15, or is that chapter 10? Chapter 10, Luke 10. Sometimes I get these things twisted around in my head. The Good Samaritan starts in verse 30, but back up to get the context to verse 25. It says, a lawyer stood up, put him to the test. By the way, what was a lawyer in Jesus' day?
Student of the law,
Of what law?
Moses' law.
Of Moses' law. A student of Moses' law. Somebody whose vocation was the law of God. That's what a lawyer was. Not like today, where a lawyer is somebody who helps you with lawsuits and things like that. That's very different. This was somebody who knew the law. Might not have had it in their heart, but they knew the law. A lawyer stood up and put him to the test, saying, "Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?" And he said to him, "What's written in the law? How does it read to you?" He answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And he said to him, "You've answered correctly. Do this and you'll live." But wishing to justify himself, he said to Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied and said, "Let me tell you a parable about a man going down from Jerusalem to Jericho." Oh, wait a minute. Is that what it said? Doesn't say that, does it? It doesn't say this is a parable. Jesus replied and said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho." Now, we know that we can say things, we can start to tell something like this, and our intention is to tell something that people know isn't true. For example, if I said, a guy had a talking dog for sale. And he put a sign out on the street that said, "Talking dog for sale, $10. What do you know that is? You know this is a joke. He's telling a joke. I don't mean it literally. You know I don't, but I wouldn't necessarily say, now you got to understand this is a joke. I might just start by saying, guy had a talking dog for sale. And everybody knows, oh, he's going to tell us a joke. It's my favorite joke, by the way, for now. At any rate, Jesus starts telling this story or giving this account. I think he's giving an account of something that actually happened to illustrate the answer to this guy's question, who is my neighbor? A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers. They stripped him, beat him, went away leaving him half dead. By chance, a priest was going down on that road. Is that a possibility that actually happened? Well, sure it is. What'd the priest do? Pass by on the other side. How many people listening to Jesus who may not have said it out loud, but would have been thinking in their mind, oh yeah, I can see that happening. I know some of these priests. They'd have passed by on the other side, for sure. A Levite, verse 32, also, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. And probably there were people who would have, yeah, I know, there's Levites that would do that. Maybe some Levites there that said, yeah, I'd have passed by on the other side. I don't want to touch that guy. But a Samaritan. Now, what do you think happened in the people's minds when he said a Samaritan? What's that?
He didn't think this guy would ever help anybody until they thought the Samaritans were the lowest class of people that were out there. If the priest, he didn't.
I have to think, because of what Jesus knew and what history of that culture tells us, as soon as he mentioned Samaritan, emotions were stirred. What's he going to say about this Samaritan? And they could be, I don't want to hear anything good about a Samaritan. I don't want to hear anything bad about a priest or bad about a Levite, but Jesus didn't paint them in very good light. And then he says a Samaritan who was on a journey came upon him, and when he saw him, he felt compassion. Came to him, bandaged up his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them, and he put him on his own beast and brought him to an inn and took care of him. On the next day, he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper and said, take care of him, and whatever more you spend, when I return, I'll repay you. Which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell into robbers' hands? What did the lawyer answer? Did he say the Samaritan? He did not say the Samaritan. He said the one who showed mercy. And who knows if there's anything behind that, but it sure sounds to me like there's something behind that. He didn't want to say the Samaritan, I don't think. So he said the one who showed mercy. And Jesus said to him, go and do the same. Whether this actually happened, that Jesus was recalling an account of something that actually took place, or whether it was a story that he made up to illustrate this point, the point is still perfectly illustrated. Who's my neighbor? Anybody that has a need. I come upon somebody with a need, that guy's my neighbor. Whether he's a Jew and I'm a Samaritan, whether there's an estrangement between us and his own people who should have helped him, did not help him, just because the priest and the Levite passed by, that doesn't remove my obligation to have compassion and to do something. So Jesus told this story, or gave this account, whichever it was, and it was parabolic. It was cast down alongside this question. Who's my neighbor? This illustrates who your neighbor is. It's anybody who's in need.
Marty,
Yes.
Jericho, that was part of Samaria, wasn't it?
Jericho was the first city that the Israelites encountered when they crossed.
I mean, later on, it was part of Samaria with the Jews.
I don't think it was. I'll have to look it up on the map.
Yeah, I think it was. He was in his own country to begin with.
See if I got a map back here that shows Jericho.
it's the Salt Sea. Samaria is on the Mediterranean coast, opposite side of the.
No, Jericho was in either, looks like Benjamin or Judah.
Jericho's south of
Yes, south of Samaria. Samaria didn't start for probably,
Jerusalem.
by this map, probably 15 to 20 miles north before you get to the border of Samaria. So he was even, this Samaritan was out of his own country, out of his own neighborhood, so to speak. He's in a different hood, and yet he stops and helps this guy. Good question, Mike. I'm sorry, Boyd.
I'm trying to track here, right on the border between convention and Hebrew.
Okay. So go to Jerusalem and take a left.
What we want to remember it was a shortcut to Jerusalem, really.
Okay.
And they went around it because they didn't want to go through it. But it was actually a shortcut to Jerusalem.
When Jesus took that shortcut through Samaria,
Yeah.
what did the Samaritans say?
Well, the woman said, what are you asking me to draw you water for? You're not even supposed to be talking to me. See, she understood he was a Jew. She said, you're not even supposed to be talking to me. So Jesus is using a prime example of the law of your, in other words, a social thing is you don't talk to those people.
So there was one incident where he was interacting with a Samaritan. By the way, after she talked with him for a while, she went into town, told everybody who was out there, and they all came out, and they said to Jesus, or they said to her, we believe that he's the Messiah now, not because you told us, but because we've come and seen him for ourselves. So one woman, even if you got a bad reputation, can do a lot of good once you get straightened out with who the Savior is. But later on, he was on his way to Samaria, or to Jerusalem, went through Samaria, and the Samaritans said, you're going to Jerusalem. We don't want to have anything to do with you. Get on out of here. And what did the apostles want to do at that point? Let's call down fire like Elijah did. So they were looking at the scriptures and seeing this pattern, if you will, this idea laid down by Elijah of calling down fire from heaven. And Jesus laid down a different pattern, a different idea. He said, you don't know what spirit you're of. He said, the Son of Man did not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. And so they stopped thinking like Elijah was thinking, not saying that Elijah had done anything bad, because he didn't. Everything Elijah did was fine. As a matter of fact, who sent the fire? Was it Elijah? It was God that sent the fire, so it had to be right for that fire to be sent. But Jesus is saying, let's think a different way about this now. Let's think in terms of turning the other cheek, going the second mile. That kind of a philosophy. All right, good point, Mike. Don.
How do we relate that parable of the Samaritan today? Does someone have to be half dead on the side of the road before we stop? Or what do we do with these people with the signs? Should we just say, oh, they're bums, so don't roll down your window?
Really? I saw that question asked online today. Somebody was asking, how far does my obligation go to help my neighbor? And it's a good question. And as soon as you make a rule, what's going to happen? As soon as you make a rule, you're going to have to break it. But
I'm not making a rule. I'm just, and regardless if that person's a bum or not, it bothers me to bypass it because I don't ever see anything where it says, oh, don't feed the bums.
right.
Or don't feed those people that do that stuff. And so, but I'll be granted, it bugs me to see them because I think that one side of me. So I don't know if it's being legalistic or what, but sometimes I just throw a lot of nuts in my console because when I stop and see them and they're right there and I'm not going to just dodge them, I'll roll down the window. Well, here's some peanuts, or here's a bag of something. I don't like to give them money, but sometimes I don't have time to run over and grab a hamburger and give it to them, and I don't mind giving people food even if I'm getting taken. But I just sometimes when I'm all alone at night, I'm looking to God and I'm saying, how do you want me to react to this? I just don't know. I don't know what His answer is going to be when I stand before Him on judgment. And I don't see where he says, well, just call him a bum and go on, you know?
Yeah.
So it bothers my conscience not to do something, you know, when I see this parable and others like it. I'm not saying I'm right.
Sure.
I'm saying you're wrong to go ahead and bypass them. I'm not, you know, I'm just saying, you know, how do we deal with these things today? Because, you know, it comes up a little bit.
It's an excellent question.
I was just going to say as far as, but also Jesus taught his disciples when he sent them out to be wise as serpents and innocent as doves.
Right.
I mean, I look at that as far as, because my kids have the same question, and you have to give an answer to that.
Right.
And so in explaining that to them, you know, I just explained to them, there are certain ways to help. There are certain programs that we can assist and help to get these people help and give them assistance. But when you go out in the world, you have to use your discernment like Christ taught his disciples to do, to be wise as serpents and innocent as doves, and there was a purpose in that. Otherwise, I don't think he would have told it to them.
Right.
And I do that all the time. I mean, I was in a help center for my daughter who just kind of went nuts, you know, and so people there would ask me for money or ask me for something. I'd say, well, you know, I don't pass out money, and I don't, you know, I mean, if I had something else, then I'd take. You know, I've been taken for food before, but that's not a big deal for me. I know that they're probably not needing anything, but had a guy out here at Wednesday night one night. I walked out there and he said, you know, he wanted some money, and I said, well, what do you need it from? He said, well, I said, well, we got some food back here in the pantry, or I can buy you a sandwich at the quick stop. And he goes, well, I got tickets to pay. And I said, well, I wouldn't help my own daughter if she was getting tickets. I said, I'd make her pay them for herself, you know. And then I looked in the car and I saw the rolling papers on the side of the seat, you know. I'm like, you know, I kind of got on him a little bit. And he goes, oh, yeah. And I said, I'll still buy you a sandwich even though you've done all that. He goes, okay. And so I went down there and bought him a sandwich, you know, even though I knew he was trying to take me. And probably did. But, and I agree, I'm not going to give him an arm and a leg, you know. I mean, but, you know, a little something, I don't know. I don't know if just a little love might make that person think. I've told people, you know, this is you, I think I'm getting taken, but, you know, consider this just an act of love from Jesus, you know. And so I don't know if it'll wake them up, not wake them up, make them think, who knows, you know.
I haven't figured it all out. Mike?
I used to live in Memphis, Tennessee, and I'd take my noon meal at City Park overlooking the Mississippi River, and they were full of people always going around asking for money. And every time one of them asked me for money, I would tell them I'll take you across the street and buy you a meal. And I never had to buy a single meal.
Wow.
It happened too at the zoo twice, same guy. I mean, a year apart.
No, I'm sure it's different.
A year apart, the guy comes up to me. I'm walking in to meet my family because they're already there the second time. And this guy comes up to me and says, I need some gas. You know, the casino's right across the street over there, and with the machines. And I said, well, you know, I need some gas. Well, I'll go by and take gas. And I said, wasn't you here last year asking the same thing? He goes, you know, he kind of looked at me kind of funny, and he didn't meet me for the gas anyway.
Yeah.
So they're just, I mean, she's right, you know, you got to be shrewd. You've got to, you know, just not hand out there, you know.
It's a hard call sometimes.
Yeah.
But the trick is don't lose your sense of compassion for people who really are in need.
Yeah, I get concerned. You know, I want to make sure I have that balance.
I know that there are people who would drive by somebody who's standing there holding the sign, but they would never drive by if they saw an accident
Right.
and somebody injured by the side of the road. They'd pull over and they would assist. Don?
Yeah, I go into Oklahoma City sometimes and under I-40 and Martin Luther King. And they got professional bums there. You're allowed to hit the corner. This bum, he'll work this corner for a certain length of time, and then another bum will take over. They're not bums. That's how they make their money.
Mm-hmm.
I've watched the changing of the bums. I know.
Changing of the bums. I'll tell you this, because I've been doing this for years. People show up at churches and they expect churches to give them money. And people come, especially when the gas got so high, people came and asked for gas. If you begin to give people gas, you get a line forming at your door. And every penny we take in on Sunday could be given out to people for gas throughout the week. And it's interesting to me, we might not have anybody come for a few weeks, and then one person comes, and as soon as you help one, then the next day you've got 2 or 3 more. It's like they send word, hey, they're giving out gas over here. So for a while we thought, well, how are we going to do? Because what do you do? People are coming at your door to the church asking for help. What do you do? So he said, okay, well, do we give out? Okay, we'll give out $30 worth of gas to every person, and we'll do this only 3 times a week. Well, once they get the system figured out, that means every week you're giving away $90 worth of gas to whoever shows up. What's that?
I said, when are you giving away all the time?
Yeah, really. I know. Because we've got people exactly in the congregation that need some financial assistance. And after a couple of weeks of that, it just seemed, wait a minute, we can't be doing this. This is not, I think, what the Lord intended for us to be. So you go through attempting to help in different ways, and then you figure out that this isn't really what the Lord intended. This can't be it. This is not the glory of the kingdom to be passing out gas dollars at the door of the church building every week, because there are just people who they're bums. They're on the take. We finally contacted the police over one guy who kept coming, and he always had a specific deal. My alternator broke. I need $37.53. Okay. I mean, he was here all the time with some kind of a specific deal. And it got to the point where, I knew he was a charlatan because the first time he showed up, he said he was a member here. I said, what? You're a member here? Oh, you know we need the elders? Well, I can't recall any of their names right now. Do you know who I am? Oh, you're the pastor. How long you been a member here? So I knew he was a liar. Frank?
You talk about gasoline, I'll tell you this, it happened to me a good long while back. I pulled in the gas station to fill up my car. And there was a guy there in his pickup with a stick trying to check the gas in his pickup. I went in to pay for my gas, he come in behind me. And he pulled out a whole bunch of pennies and laid on the counter and was counting them out to buy enough gas to get a certain distance. And he said, I like 50 cents. I said, here, partner, here's 50 cents. He said, oh boy, I got enough now to buy me a beer. What do you do about that? Is that my neighbor or is he not?
I could tell you stories.
He could be my neighbor. He could be my neighbor. If he said I'm hungry, I said I'll buy you something to eat, but I will not give you no money. I'll go buy you something.
Yeah. We had a guy come by the church building once and said, I need help. I got a 4-year-old baby. It needs diapers and formula. I said, come on, hop in the truck. Took him down to the grocery store there, not too far. Took him in the store, bought him $40 worth of diapers and groceries. And when we were leaving, I said, come on, I'll give you a ride home. He said, no, that's okay. I don't need a ride. I've got my friend coming to pick me up. Oh, really? Well, it's on our, we'll be glad to take you. No, I got a ride coming. So we left and watched. And he went back in the store, turned that stuff in for the cash. And he wasn't too happy when we confronted him about it. And we beat the tar out of him and left him in the gutter. No, we didn't do that. We wanted to do that. Another guy was coming.
Beat him down, leaving naked alongside the road.
Yeah.
Poor guy.
You wait here for the priest and the Levite. And there might be a Samaritan come by there. But another guy came and I took him, bought him a meal. Next time he came, said, I'm hungry. Can you help me? I said, yeah, come on, let's go over to Brahms. He said, well, I'm tired of hamburgers. Well, then go home. That's what I told him. I said, if you're tired of hamburgers, go home. I said, if I was you and I was hungry and asking for food, I'd take anything anybody give me. Yeah, this guy they're out there. So what's that mean with regard to Jesus telling this parable? When somebody's obviously in need, we have an obvious obligation. When it's questionable, I remember what Jesus said. He said there were a lot of widows in the days of Elisha the prophet. But he only went to the one who was a widow of Zarephath, not even a Jew. And he said there were a lot of lepers in Israel in the days of Naaman. He said, but he was the only one that was helped. Now, what does that mean? Because when Jesus showed up, he could have snapped his fingers and every financial crisis could have been resolved. Every health issue could have been taken care of, but he didn't do that. When people came to him, he did what he could, and he didn't always do what people asked him to do, but he did what he could. With the miraculous, he's unlimited. I believe he understands that we are not unlimited. We are very small, we are very limited, and yet through us, the glory of God can be seen. And I think that's what Jesus is trying to get across to us. So, good question, Mike. Lord willing, next week, we'll get started on number 2 with the tares and the wheat. And look at the backside of this. Oh, if you want to do this in preparation for next week, it would be very beneficial. I know it would. Count the number of times. Look at number 3 on the back. Count the number of times you see the phrase kingdom of heaven is like, or the kingdom of heaven may be compared to, and then notice how many other times the kingdom is made reference to in one way or another. Count those times, because this helps us to understand that the whole point of parables is to get us to understand what's the kingdom of heaven like. The rest of those questions all deal with information in Matthew 13. So if you want to go ahead and work on that for next week, you'll be well ahead of the game. Any other observations or comments, questions? We got a couple of minutes. We could throw something around. We could argue more about how to help people. Boyd?
Just as a point of fact, Oklahoma City now issues permits to bums who stand at the corner for a small fee.
For a small fee, you can get a permit to stand at the corner and ask for handouts. Interesting.
One time they came to my also right there, they wanted the TV personalities bummed up, I guess, it was like, and stood out there, and average what they made that day, if they did that every day, they'd make like $80 a year. Tax free.
That's pretty good money.
Yeah.
Bud?
I think what we need to come away from all this is God doesn't expect the impossible, only that which is possible for you as a person. Now, I may give someone $1 without even thinking about it, but I'm not going to give him $100 to go get groceries or beer or anything else. I don't want to aid and abet him in his life of mooching on people.
Right.
So, like you say, well, I'll take you down to Brahms and buy you a hamburger. You were doing what was possible, and probably it revealed that was not his true intent to begin with. You know, when he says, no, I'm tired of hamburgers. Let's go get some steak or something.
Well,
But, in other words, he wants to use your guilt complex to get what he wants from you. So you're not actually giving him anything. You're helping him to carry out whatever his plans are. You know, maybe he wants to buy a beer. Like the man that was holding up the sign, I said, the first honest bum I've seen on this street, he said, I will work for beer. You know, it wasn't there.
that's
I said,
good.
that's the first honest guy I've seen on this street.
Yeah.
The rest of them says, we'll work for food, we'll work any kind of work. You say, well, okay, I've got a job for you. Well, I'm having a cold and I've got the laryngitis. You know, they got all kinds of excuses why they can't work, but they've advertised that they would work. He just said, I will work for beer.
I remember seeing a young Asian man, obviously Asian man, on the streets of Chicago, had a violin, had his case open, and in his case he had a little sign. Now he was playing the violin, but it was horrible. Sounded like a screeching cat. And the sign said, please, for donation for violin lessons for Honor Mother. And I said, yeah, I'd give him $20 just for the entertainment value of the sign. Frank?
I got one more to tell you.
All right, one more.
Tell the group.
All right.
We went to Virginia a few years back on vacation. We come back, we pulled into a rest area in Tennessee. And there was a man and a woman. No, it was in Tennessee.
Straighten him out,
It
Wilma.
was in Tennessee. This man, a woman, and a little girl
Okay.
had the hood up on their car. Well, we pulled in a good ways down there from him, and he come down there and said he's having car trouble, needing some help. They was on their way to Washington, state of Washington. She said I didn't give him any money. I don't remember for sure, but I don't guess we did. I didn't give him any money. But anyhow, a few months later than that, my son and me made another trip out there. We pulled into the same rest area. The same car was sitting there, the same man, same woman, same little girl.
He never did
Was trying
get
to
any help,
money
did
to
he?
get the state of Washington.
Man.
It was really a year later.
She said it was a year later.
Did he look any skinnier?
Same place, still sitting there.
Wow.
I told Dane, my son, I said, without a doubt, that Cadillac sitting right down yonder belongs to them people, and they got a wreck sitting there all the time. That's the way they make a living,
Well.
right there.
Could be. You just never know. So you do what you can, when and where you can, and the rest of it, you just let go. But you can always talk to the Lord about it.
You gotta leave something in the Lord's hands.
You got to.
I can't really make a decision on this, so.
I know. And as soon as you do, you'll have to change it. Okay, is that the third bell? All right. Lord love you. Class dismissed.